Okay, hello and welcome to the Festival of Computing 2021, a unique collaboration between Plymouth University and Computing at School. And the session that you've joined is called Using STEM Ambassadors to Support Curriculum Delivery. My name is Wendy Piccinini and I am one of the Computing at School outreach managers covering London and the East of England. I'll be your host for the session, and today I am accompanied by Thomas Gardner, a student ambassador, who is moderating the session and monitoring the question window. We are joined today by our presenters, Sam Ansell and Stephen Amor, and I'll be handing over to them shortly. Just before we do, I have a couple of things to say. In terms of housekeeping, during the session, please use the chat window, which is usually on the right-hand side of your screen, to ask questions. You may need to click on the chat icon to open it. Our student ambassador will be making a note of questions posed there, and these will be answered, if time allows, at the end of the session. As a reminder, all attendees are in listen-only mode. If you'd like a copy of today's slides, then these will be available to download from the Computing at School website. Finally, the hashtag for this event is hashtag CAS PLYM21. Please tweet about the sessions that you're attending throughout the day. So I'm going to hand over to Sam Ansell shortly, and just by way of introduction, Sam is an experienced project manager, trainer and communicator with over 20 years of experience working with educators, young people and volunteers. She's worked for CSW Group for over 19 years in a variety of roles, including careers, education, consultancy for schools, employer engagement, and since 2014 as STEM manager, leading on their STEM-related contracts. Sam is joined by Stephen Amor, who is a secondary STEM ambassador. So over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Wendy. Hi, thanks ever so much for joining. I'm going to dive right in because I know we're probably a little bit tight on time. So how it's going to work is I'm going to do a brief overview of the STEM Ambassador Programme, and then I'm going to hand over to Steve, who is one of our STEM ambassadors, and he's got lots to share with you just in terms of what he gets up to as a STEM ambassador and other things that are available for you to access. So here we go. I am going to share my screen. Let's see if this is going to work. Here we go. There we go. So I'm just going to minimize that. So STEM Ambassador Programme, I don't know whether any of you are familiar with the programme. It's been around a long, long time now, I think over 20 years in various guises, but it's a national programme and it's funded through government. And essentially what it's about is about allowing young people direct access to STEM ambassadors who are volunteers from STEM industries, and it's about helping bring those STEM subjects to life. And the way I describe it is about kind of education and inspiration. So maybe giving those young people an opportunity to hear about a job that they perhaps didn't know existed, and to help them make those connections between what they're studying and where that potentially could lead to in terms of careers. So as it says here, our STEM ambassadors, who are, I would say, between the ages of 18 and 80, I think our oldest STEM ambassador is in his 80s, they come from all walks of life. And like I said, they're either working in a STEM role or perhaps used to. We have some people who are retired, or they're perhaps studying a STEM subject. And they volunteer their time to talk to young people. And from a secondary school perspective particularly, I just want to make those highlights and those links to the Gatsby benchmarks. So the careers leads in your schools will no doubt be aware of these and be working to make sure that the careers programme your school is offering has meets those 8 Gatsby benchmarks. So having STEM ambassadors come into your school will help meet those benchmarks that I've listed there. Linking curriculum learning, encounters with employers, and experiences of workplace. Okay, so just to give you a flavour of where our STEM ambassadors are, this by no means is an exhaustive list, but it just gives you an idea, some of the STEM companies across our region. And I should have said, sorry, our hub is called Southwest Peninsula, and it covers just Devon and Cornwall. There are 19 hubs in total across the UK. And at the moment, we've got over 1,000 STEM ambassadors on our book, so to speak. To be a STEM ambassador, we ask them to do one activity every 12 months. Obviously, we're in unusual times, so there has been less opportunity in the last year for STEM ambassadors to talk to young people. However, it has happened, and we've moved our programme online. So you can see there the list really of activities. And again, this isn't a kind of a prescriptive list, but it shows you some of the things that our STEM ambassadors can get involved in. Primarily what they can do is to visit school, obviously when schools are open and open to visitors and to guests. They can go into a classroom, they can deliver assemblies, lunchtime talks, give presentations, Q&A sessions. If you have careers fairs, they can take part in those. If you deliver any careers input through collapsed curriculum days, they can get involved in those days. I'd really encourage you to consider using STEM ambassadors for project work. So if any of your schools have STEM clubs, you might not call them a STEM club, it could be science club, DT, you might have things like code club or robotics clubs, anything really that is linked to STEM, and you're doing project work. Having STEM ambassadors support you in that is a really great opportunity to give those industry links. We also have STEM ambassadors help with mock interviews, and often they can bring in bits of kit that maybe school wouldn't have access to. And lastly, kind of mentoring and e-mentoring. So all of that is online at the moment. Schools are asking for support from STEM ambassadors, and the way that's working at the moment is that they will use whatever platform you use as a school, whether that's Microsoft Teams, or I know a lot of schools use Google Classrooms. So they can come into the classroom virtually and deliver a talk or a presentation, and of course are there to be able to answer any questions. So it's a really broad way in which they can help. And that just really sums up what I hope you can see are the benefits to having STEM ambassadors visit your school or talk to students. It is free of charge because it's a funded programme. And yeah, I just think it's great that you'll be able to have your students speak directly with your local employers. Okay, I am going to stop sharing. Oh, sorry, I just want to give you my email before I go. So if you do have any questions that are not answered today, or you want to request a STEM ambassador, you've got a couple of options. You can either email us direct, ambassadors@cswgroup.co.uk, or if you are already registered on the STEM website, which is stem.org.uk, then you can request a STEM ambassador directly through that website. If you're not registered, I would really encourage you to do so, because it is free to do and it will give you access to so much, thousands and thousands of resources that are free, videos that you can watch from STEM ambassadors, and yeah, you can put your activity request through the system there, and then ambassadors can respond and get in touch with you directly. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing because potentially there are questions, and I'm going to hand over to Steve, who's going to just give you some examples of what he gets up to.
Thank you, Sam. I'll try and share my screen. I didn't see your slides move on, so I'm going to need a little bit of feedback in a second just to check my slides are moving on. But apparently your slides were moving on, but I wasn't able to see them changing. So,
oh, okay.
Everyone else saw them, but I didn't see them move on. So
yeah,
hopefully, hopefully my slide has come up now.
Yes.
Opening slide. Okay. So I started my career as an apprentice at Goonhilly Earth Station, and there's a picture on the left, or I don't know if it's on the left of your screens or whether it's on the right, but there's a picture here of Goonhilly Earth Station taken a few days ago, and that antenna was actually communicating with the Mars rover, the Perseverance rover that recently landed on Mars. And if you can see the moon there, just above the moon at 12 o'clock, there's a slightly brighter, smaller object. That's Mars. And so I started there in 1988 when it was owned by BT, and it was a fantastic apprenticeship. Even though I did a year of A-levels, I decided that it was such a fantastic opportunity. And also I was able, fortunately, to continue with education as well. So apprenticeship lasted 4 years there, and I learned lots and lots, and was able to work on projects all the time, like personal projects as well, because I was learning from those. I learned a lot about electronics, and being a child of the 80s, that's when home computers were really big, where everyone had to buy magazines and write their own programs to play games on them. So I was building, when I started my apprenticeship, I was building single board computers and connecting up displays and makeshift keyboards and speech synthesizers. So I'm programming them as well. So I've got a mix of electronics, hardware, and software. I've never been like a developer writing programs for a living, but I do occasionally write programs in my day-to-day work just to make life easier, automating the boring stuff, as it were. So what do I do now for BT? I still work for BT. I work out of the BT Tower in central London, and fortunately I'm able to work from home in Cornwall 2 or 3 days a week. I design broadcast fibre networks for TV broadcasters like the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, Sky. They're all customers of mine, and we provide super high speed, like tens of gigabits networks to bring camera feeds back from venues, sports venues like the Premier League football grounds, to the broadcasters, where they then use those camera feeds to create a completed program. And then we take those program feeds as well, and we distribute those to the large Freeview transmitters across the UK. And those are the really big transmitter sites which you might see at night with the big red lights on to stop planes crashing into them. So I've mentioned I do like to use programming to help myself in work, and I think it's a really valuable skill for anybody to have. So what I'll do is I'll quickly show you something that I made, which I wrote this about 10 years ago, actually, or maybe a little bit less than that. Did my slide move on now, just to check?
No, they haven't. No.
Oh no.
Okay. All right, let me try sharing the application rather than the presentation mode. Hopefully that's got a different slide up now.
Yes.
Okay, so these are all of our locations that my team have, where we have like large nodes connected to our network, and there's 4 people in my team, and you can't really be expected to know where each one of those is. And even if the town or city is written down on a bit of paper for each of these, I think there's about 120 of them, you're not really going, unless you happen to know that area, like I know Cornwall, for example, you're not really going to know where the closest one of these nodes is to a customer location. So So this is a Google Maps API, bit of code written in JavaScript. You enter the postcode that you're interested in the box here, and then you just press map it, and hopefully in a second my screen will change. Fingers crossed. Has it moved on?
It doesn't look
so. No. You might need to reshare again, because that worked before.
Yeah, I will. Oh dear, this is going to be a little bit painful.
If you need any help, I can provide assistance.
So I put the postcode of my house in here, rather than one of my customer sites. So hopefully you can see, well, I live in Bodmin, and does that come up with a couple of circles?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's zoomed in now, so everyone knows where their customer is, but they might not necessarily know where the nearest points to connect their customer to is. So all you got to do is provide a postcode. It tells you whether the red circle is 25 kilometers, the blue circle is 35 kilometers. I've removed a bit of information from here, but it will tell you the address of where you need to connect to, the product that you need to use to connect to, and it's I've managed to dine out on this particular small piece of software for about 8 years now. It's still extremely useful, and it's saved so much work in our team. So that's just, as I've said, automating the boring stuff and removing human error and things like that is how I use programming in my day job. Now I'm going to have to share my screen again and move on. Actually, I'm sorry. Who was it that said they would be able to help me? Because it might be easier if you shared the slides which I sent you, and then we can step through them. Although I'm not going to know whether you've moved on because mine weren't updating.
Hi, Steve.
Wonders of technology.
I think a good solution to this would be just to share your entire screen. So then you don't have to share individual applications. I don't know if that would work for you.
Yeah.
If not, Steve, I've got a copy of your slides, so I'll get those as a backup.
Unfortunately, I don't have a copy, so I won't be able to help in that department.
I believe I'm sharing my entire screen now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And has it updated? Does it say raspberry jam?
No.
Okay. Perhaps someone else could share the slides. It worked in rehearsals.
Yeah. Just give me a second.
Don't worry.
Thank you. So I've got to a stage in life now where I wanted to give something back to the community, and so it's difficult for me to be a STEM ambassador in a lot of STEM ambassadors have got time to be able to go into schools during the week, but for me that's quite difficult because I work away a lot. So I have started a few things and got involved in a few things which are at weekends and also scheduled for like half terms and summer holidays with lots of notice, which means that I can take holiday from work to actually help support those events. I can see that Wendy's sharing a screen, but it's just blank for me. So if you can let me know whereabouts you are on
the
there.
raspberry jam slide. Steve.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. So
yeah, let me know.
So for the raspberry jam. So the Raspberry Pi Foundation created a single board computer in 2012, and they made that available. They thought they were only going to sell 10,000 of them, and they've sold well over 20 million of them now. And there are a lot of people who were children of the 80s that have helped with these raspberry jams, which are events run by the community for the community. They're free events, and they're for teaching anybody how to program. So in Cornwall, we've got what we call the Cornwall Tech Jam, and we run it when we get out of COVID and lockdown. We run it once a month on a Saturday, and we alternate between Bodmin and Camborne. And there's other Raspberry Jams stroke Tech Jams in Devon and Somerset. I know in Exeter there's Exeter Library, which runs one once a month, and there's one in Torbay, I think, that runs once a month. But if you go to the raspberrypi.org website, you'll be able to see a map which will be updated when we're out of lockdown with where they are. And it's been really rewarding for me, because not only do we get people that come along, let families come along with their children. We've had someone who was as old as me bring his dad along to learn how to program as well. We've had a lot of people as well that don't actually have like internet connectivity at home. So that's quite rewarding as well, because they can't do some of the activities, and we've got loads of activities which I'll show you in a while. So perhaps we should move on to onto the next slide, if you wouldn't mind. So this is a picture of one of the tech jams at Bodmin Library, and we've got 20 or so Raspberry Pi computers which have got built-in displays. They're called Pi Tops. We have a consent form as well, so all of these people consented to being photographed. And you can see a gentleman there with jam written on his t-shirt. He's another STEM ambassador as well, actually, and I'll show you a few more bits that he does. We work very closely with an organisation in Cornwall called Software Cornwall, who provide a lot of education outreach. So I'll show you that. I'll talk about that in a minute. If we can move on to the next slide. A scary person and a less scary person, I suppose. I'll leave it to you to decide which one's which. So this was a photo booth that we had at the Raspberry Pi birthday party. Every year we sort of celebrate the birthday of the Raspberry Pi. There's an original Raspberry Pi in one hand of that gentleman there, which has actually been signed by the guy Eben Upton, that actually designed the Raspberry Pi and now is the CEO of the Raspberry Pi Foundation. So that was a very popular thing, that it automatically sent a tweet when you pressed a big button and posed for a photo. If we move on to the next slide, for those of you that aren't familiar, this is a Raspberry Pi computer. It's a little bit smaller than a mobile phone. It's actually got it's based on a mobile phone processor inside of it, so you can connect up a camera like you have in a mobile phone. You always have a camera on a phone these days, but it's also got HDMI ports for connecting to a TV, lots of USB ports, and also really importantly for me, it's got 40 pins on it. So if you can see on the sort of like top side of it, top right hand side, there's 40 pins which you can connect electronics to. And for me, making computing interact with the real world is really important, not just sort of like working on computers and just working in front of a screen all the time. So you might have noticed on the very first slide there was actually some traffic lights, and they are full-size traffic lights that we managed to get the council to give to us, because they're old traffic lights that haven't got they've got the old bulbs in them, so I don't think they use them anymore. They use traffic lights these days with LED lighting in them. So we've got traffic lights that we can connect up, real traffic lights we can connect up to Raspberry Pis and get people to program them up, all sorts of other things which I'll go through in a minute. If we move on to the next slide. This is the BBC MicroBits. We've got a lot of those as well for programming. Some of you might have come across them, but also in Cornwall, and I'm pretty sure in Devon as well, you're able to loan these from the library, just as you can loan lots of other things these days from libraries, not just books. And these small computers, this is the first generation. The second generation are a little bit more powerful, and they don't have a 5x5 LED display on them. They actually have a nice little liquid crystal display, but they are very powerful. You can do lots with them. And as I say, you can get those from the library. So we program those up as well in the tech jams. So on the next slide, I've got a title of work experience, and that was something that I was really keen to get involved in. As I say, it's very difficult for me to be able to commit to a particular time during the normal working day. So I haven't been able to support schools when they're actually in their normal school day. But work experience from a computing point of view has been very difficult to provide students with any placements, because while there are a lot of companies in Cornwall which provide which develop applications and things like that, they're quite small companies, and as you probably know, there's a fair few hoops you need to jump through these days to be able to provide work experience. And also, much as they would love to support the education outreach, some of them only got 1 or 2 people, that it makes it very, very difficult to actually spare the time to do that. So we put together a really big week-long package. So if we move on to the next slide, it's called Mission to Mars, and Mars has just become a little bit more highlighted in the press these days. And Mission to Mars is a 5-day workshop based in a company, a software company. So it's trying to provide a real live programming environment, and we get between 16 and 20 students. It's run 3 times a year. So Easter holiday, work experience week, which sometimes is a little tricky because not all schools have their work experience week at the same week, and then in the October half term. And we've had students actually, so we're based in Cornwall, but we've had students that have come down from even Scotland to attend this, and their family have come down on holiday, and during the day the student has worked on Mission to Mars. It's for 14 to 18-year-olds, and they learn an awful lot. So if you move on to the next slide, hopefully you can see a Mars rover there. We've got 2 of those. Eventually the students' code will run on these. They've got lots of sensors on them. There's some light sensors on the front. There's ultrasonic distance sensors looking forward and also looking down. It's got motors on it which you can drive and also count pulses so that you can accurately make turns. And it does actually have a gyroscope, accelerometer, and compass on there as well if you're feeling really ambitious. It's actually based on what's called an Arduino microprocessor, and also now we've also made an adapter for it for MicroBits as well. So yeah, this is what the students get their code to run on eventually. But because there's only 2 of them, and usually there's 5 or 6 groups of students, first of all they have to build their computer or build some electronics to test their code. So if we move on to the next slide, you'll see a little breadboard in the middle there with some lights shining on it, and that's simulating the Mars rover. And they've got some data sheets as well, so they learned how to read data sheets. They learned some basic electronics. They clearly learn how to program as well, but we try and bring in lots of other aspects which are involved with programming. And once they're confident that their code's going to work, then they have credits which they then buy some time on the rover. And if their code is successful and it does what it's supposed to do, then they get some additional credits. So there's a financial element as well built into this. If we move on to the next slide, here you can see an environment where we've got a lot of students working on their code. You can probably see some Postit notes there. So every time they finish a particular piece of code, they then do some retrospectives to see what worked well for them, what didn't work well for them, and what they think they'd like to improve, and if there's any help that they need. As the week goes on, each team runs at their own sort of speed, and we have industry mentors. So each team will have hopefully their own like industry mentor, someone who's come from a programming background, or knows about electronics or robotics and things like that. So if there's a specific question which perhaps their mentor can't answer, hopefully there's another mentor from one of the other teams which has got that experience which can help. So yeah, there's a lot of support. It's really great that we've got people supporting this, and I'll say it's sort of 5 days. It's very, very intense, but it's great fun. It's free as well. I should have mentioned that. So all this stuff's free. If we move on to the next slide, this is the last day where we get the students to present, and this is obviously for their presentation skills more than anything else. But they'll demonstrate some code. There'll be possibly their parents there, their teachers there, some people from industry as well. This has a bit of a side effect where it's quite good for talent spotting as well. And also during the week we have guest speakers. We've had quite a few over Skype who have been actually involved in writing code for the real Mars rovers. So we try and really inspire the children as well, and make sure that they know what's available locally in Cornwall, because space is getting big in Cornwall, but also what's available in the UK and beyond, really. Because as I say, some of the guest speakers that we've had have had to join by Skype because they're not based in Cornwall. If we move on to the next slide, we have still been running these missions to Mars during COVID, during lockdown. So we're using online tools to do that. Here's a simulation of the Arduino computer running a program called Tinkercad, and so the students can still do all of their coding and check the electronics, and then they actually using a system called Git and GitHub, they will submit their code to one of the mentors, who will then run the code and provide like a video camera showing the rover and what's happened when they run the code, which invariably actually it will either do nothing, do completely the opposite and something completely different to what the students thought it was going to do, or if they're really lucky, it will actually do what they hoped it would do. There's also digital badges, which we're getting into now. I don't actually know too much about the digital badges, but that is something that we've been working on with Software Cornwall to make sure that all of these different ways that people can get recognition. I mean, when we first started off, we were providing nice certificates for the students. If we move on to the next slide, so everything that I'm going to talk about today and everything that I've spoken about is all free. The organisation called Software Cornwall is a member-funded organisation funded by people in technology in Cornwall, and it enables it's a vehicle for providing education outreach. And because of all of this work that I've been doing and working with Software Cornwall, we actually got some funding as well for 2 full-time people to support schools. So this is where we can support schools, but unfortunately only in Cornwall from a funding point of view. But if anyone would like to contact softwarecornwall.org, I think if you email info@softwarecornwall.org, if you're not in Cornwall, to see what they can provide, I'm sure they'll be able to do something for you. But what they can do is they can tailor Mission to Mars bite size, so anything from a few hours to a couple of days to go into schools and actually run them in term time. Robert, who had his Raspberry Jam t-shirt on earlier, also loves going into schools to assemblies to talk about what's available in Cornwall. If we go on to the next slide, I was hoping to do some live demos today, but unfortunately I wasn't able to. And one of the things that we do at our tech jams is a balloon popping activity. So if we move on to the next slide, we can see there's a little bit of electronics here. We've got a 9-volt battery providing a power supply to a very low value resistor via a transistor as a switch. And when you press the button, essentially what happens is the transistor, the button is pressed, it tells the Raspberry Pi, which is the green element of this with the 40 general purpose input output pins above, that's the Raspberry Pi. It sees that the button has been pressed, and the code will acknowledge the button's been pressed, and then the green wire is actually switching the transistor on. The transistor will provide an enormous amount of current to the low value resistor and turn it into a mini heater. And that mini heater, as you can see, is taped to the balloon, and after a few seconds it will actually burst the balloon. Little did I realize that there's quite a few issues with that in an environment where you have families with all of their children, especially young children in pushchairs who didn't take kindly to the large bang. But what did surprise me as well, there was a pregnant lady who didn't bat an eyelid. I nearly jumped out my skin, and next to me was a pregnant lady, and I just thought, oh gosh, that's not very good, is it? A bang like that. But she didn't bat an eyelid. So if we move on to the next slide, another activity is launching paper rockets. So here you actually build the rocket as well, and then if we move on to the next slide, it's powered by compressed air, so and connected up to a Raspberry Pi computer. You'll write a bit of code and again probably press a button. You can get the Raspberry Pi to play some sound. So I think there was like a countdown, and then off the rocket goes. So that's quite good fun, the Raspberry Jams. But again, this can be brought into schools as well. If we move on to the next slide, another activity is what's called Sonic Pi, and this is actually writing code for music, and it's another way to get children interested in writing code if they're not interested in pressing buttons to fire rockets and things, but they might be musical. And Sonic Pi is great for writing simple code. So you've got you can simply write loops. There's time delays. You might be able to see the word sleep in there. So, and there's samples as well. There's hundreds of samples, anything from drums to pianos to farts. Kids love that as well, it seems. If we move on to the next slide, here's the user interface for Sonic Pi. So they can see the waveforms that are being generated as well. This has been heavily focused at education, as well as the Dr. Sam Aaron, who was on the previous slide, who wrote all of this code. He actually does live algorithmic music events, and he can actually look at the dance floor when people are dancing and adjust his code to see how they react. It's quite phenomenal, actually. If you get a chance, Google Sonic Pi. There's so many different people that have put their music up on the internet. If we move on to the next slide, of course, everyone loves Minecraft, and the Raspberry Pi has some limitations from Minecraft, but they're sort of deliberate. You can't, for example, detonate TNT, and everyone loves detonating TNT. You can't do that without writing any code. You can't just hit it with your sword and it detonates. You have to actually write a bit of code. And here we've got some code that generates objects. There's an engine house there, which I think you can actually probably see that's an engine house, but there's also a satellite dish from Goonhilly there, which is what the other object is. So procedurally generating objects is one of the activities. Also connecting up electronics to the Raspberry Pi to be able to change LED colors depending on whether you might be in the sky or underwater or walking on land. And also virtual photo booths have been done, and teleportation devices, because you can teleport around in Minecraft because you know your XYZ coordinates, and with a bit of code you can teleport quite easily. You can put messages on the screen. So yeah, that's another thing that kids love. Here we go. There's a bit of code. Oh, sorry, I've just put my slide forward. If we can go on to the next slide. This is actually some code which I was writing with a teacher. A teacher came along to see what we did, and she was asking about logic gates. So we wrote some code to sort of like demonstrate logic gates. So we've got two inputs, A and B, and an output C, and you've got I think you can just about see there's a blue LED and a red LED on the input, and what looks like an amber LED on the output. So yeah, just experimenting with how we can write some code to help the students understand logic gates. So if we move on to the next slide, this is a timing gate. So some bit of physics in here. The bit of wood is actually about 1.5 meters long strip of wood, and there's a gate at the other end as well, and it's on a slight slope. Excuse me. And there's a microbit at the top with a light, a flashlight pointing at it, and a bit at the bottom, and you just write a simple bit of code. When the beam of light is broken at the top, it starts the counter, and when it's broken at the bottom, it stops the counter. And there's quite a few antique little matchbox cars which are available to see which car's the fastest. And I'm sure if it was like a physics lesson as well, you could do some acceleration due to gravity bits and pieces with that activity as well. If we move to the next slide, there's some Neopixels, which are addressable red, amber and green LEDs, each individually addressable, and that's another great activity with students changing the color of the lights. If we move on to the next slide, I'm conscious that we're probably running short of time now, nearly at the end. Software Cornwall, as I said, is a great organisation, really big on educational outreach and finding and building the pipeline for future developers, which hopefully will stay in Cornwall for the companies in Cornwall. It's a big issue for recruitment of candidates in Cornwall in these companies. So and they've been really helpful for me as well to be able to find venues to run the events which I've sort of conceived and got up and running. So yeah, the last slide is a thank you slide. There's some URLs on there as well, and some Twitter handles to check out. I think I've pretty well covered everything that I was going to cover. Yeah, so as I say, I guess not many of you.
Steve? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'm guessing not many teachers are actually based in Cornwall, which, as I say, if you're not, just still have a look at Software Cornwall and still drop them a line and see what they might be able to do with you. Some of the things like the mission to Mars, we've been looking at how we can actually replicate that and roll it out into other counties. But I think, as quite a few people know, finding volunteers is quite difficult sometimes to help with some of these things. So everyone's quite busy. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions.
I think there wasn't any specific questions in the chat, but there were a lot of very positive comments about your presentation. So I just wanted to share a couple of those. Amazing content, completely fascinating. So I think it's certainly been well received, and the people watching have really enjoyed all the things that you've shared. So I think, yeah, if they want some more information about what you were talking about, Steve, it's the info at softwarecornwall.org. Is that right?
Yeah, or just go to www.softwarecornwall.org.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. And Sam, if they've got any general questions about STEM ambassadors visiting their school, it's best to go to the website, the STEM ambassador.
Yeah, best go to the website if you know kind of what you're looking for, or if you just want to chat it through to begin with, then email us at ambassadors@cswgroup.co.uk. I think there was one question in there about whether you're too far to go to your nearest tech jam, but yes, STEM ambassadors should be able to do similar activities, the kind of activities that Steve's been showing this morning. So yeah, we'd love to help you.
Brilliant. We're bang on time, so just want to say thank you so much to Sam and to Steve for presenting today. It was a really interesting session. A recording of this webinar will be available on the CAS YouTube channel in the coming weeks, so you can look out for that. We'd be grateful for your feedback, and we'll be sending out a survey via email. So if you could fill that in, we'd really appreciate to hear your thoughts. We hope to see you at other sessions in this Festival of Computing today. The next session on the secondary track will begin shortly and is about NCCE computing hubs. If you haven't already registered, you can register through the CAS Plymouth website. And that's it for this session. Thanks so much for coming along. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.